Earlier this month, we went to see the Great Barn in Harmondsworth, a village on the outskirts of West London. It is not visible from the road or bus, and we finally found it to the rear of the village and church, in a protected, gated area. The enclosure has other private dwellings in it, but there was no need to seek out the barn. It stood right before us, up a short driveway to the right, a huge, long building with dark, vertical weatherboards, and a new roof of bright orange clay tiles. The enormous barn doors were open, and volunteers from Friends of the Great Barn group were sitting in the entrance, counting and welcoming the visitors. It is open 2 Sundays each month, from April to October. It was a bright and warm sunny day, and I felt as if I ought to be bringing a sheaf with me as a contribution, to help see the villagers through a bleak and hungry winter, although a selection of my own produce would probably amount to a small box of apples from the garden. We entered the dark interior, which immediately lightened up as our eyes got out of the sunlight. We seemed to be in a well-ordered forest of great oaks, surrounding us on all sides and above, and stretching away into the far distance. Although the barn is empty, the volunteers have placed various items of interest and information posters in some of the aisles, with a projected video at the near end, giving a short history. I'm glad to say that my camera did an excellent job of capturing the light without me having to know anything about the various settings, and the photos were full of colour and detail. It has been affectionately called the Cathedral of Middlesex, a very apt description of the magnificent interior, although its location is now known as the London Borough of Hillingdon. The resemblance is not accidental, as the medieval carpenters and craftsmen would have also worked on churches, cathedrals, and the great houses of the time. The best view is looking straight down the length of the building to the far end, a forest of oak posts and sunlight glinting through all the vertical gaps between the weatherboards. I think probably the ventilation provided by the gaps outweighs any concerns about the rain blowing in. The multitude of rafters and bracing beams above us seemed to accentuate the great height, and a photograph does not really show this so well, as it only gives the target area in isolation. When you are actually standing there, you have peripheral vision, which gives the sense of space and height. Records from the year 1110 show that an earlier great barn and granary stood on this site. It was damaged by a storm in 1398 and then repaired. Winchester College commissioned William Kipping and John at Oak to obtain timbers to build a replacement barn in 1426. Dendrochronology testing has confirmed this date for the timbers. This medieval aisled barn was formerly known as Manor Farm Barn, and is the largest timber-framed building in England. It was used to store agricultural produce for over 500 years, until the 1970s, when it was bought by 2 successive property developers and allowed to fall into disrepair. English Heritage made compulsory emergency repairs and finally purchased it in January 2012, thus saving it for the nation. The building was further repaired, with a new roof and replacement of timbers where necessary. Over 95% of the timbers are original, and where old timbers have had to be taken out, these are kept on display in some of the aisles. The barn is oriented in a north-south direction, with the doors facing east. It is 58.5 metres long, 11.3 metres wide, and 11.9 metres high, and has 12 bays and 3 double doors for the entry of wagons. The total footprint is 661 square metres, and the internal volume is 4,890 cubic metres. The main posts are oak, 36 centimetres square, and sitting on blocks of Reigate sandstone. The tree trunks were placed upside down, so that the larger circumference was at the top, to help the joining of the other roof beams, and some of the posts are made of a single trunk sawn in two, making a matching pair for the frame. 3 of the 12 aisles were used for threshing, and the remainder for storage of the grain. The weatherboards are made of oak, elm, pine and fir of various ages. The roof has 92 courses and a total of 76,000 tiles. The floor was originally hard-packed flint gravel and later repaired with brick, tiles and more recently cement. We wandered along to each aisle in turn, reading all the information sheets, remembering to look forward and back for new photographic angles on the views up and down the length of the building. At the far end is a pile of original timbers on a pallet, which had been removed and replaced from the weatherboarding, and in one of the doorways a piece of a doorpost head, too rotten to remain in situ, but now providing an easy close-up view of its construction for visitors. On one table is a selection of tiles, and one of them has 2 deer footprints on the corner, where the animal had run over the wet clay. I can imagine the men's dismay as they chased the deer out of their work area, and maybe they lost a few more tiles in the disturbance. They might even have forfeited some wages to cover the loss. Obviously, someone went ahead and fired and used it anyway. In those days, building materials were much harder won and expensive, and I am sure they were not as wasteful as we are. But maybe the tiler was tempted to use that one on the top course, out of sight. I found myself peering closely at the wooden posts, now pale grey, pitted and streaked, and very dry looking, imagining when it was new. It was once fresh and bright, cut by hand from the forest, and surrounded by lots of noise and effort as it was shaped, marked and installed by the carpenters. I can hear the noise of voices shouting orders, in something that would seem like English, but probably not be intelligible to me. I can hear the creaking carts, rasping hand saws, and mallets tapping the oak pegs into place. Very conveniently, my imagination does not venture into the smells of the time, other than the scent of freshly cut wood, with a brisk summer breeze to disperse the farmyard odours. I was interested to read how the mortise and tenon holes were slightly offset, so that the oak peg drew them together tightly as it was hammered in, and also how the peg became even tighter as the timbers gradually dried out, thus firming up and strengthening the entire frame. I also read how using metal nails weakens the building as they rust, with the rust swelling and splitting the wood. And this is the reason that everything was held together with the oak pegs, which could be made rapidly in large amounts from the offcuts of the main timbers. The modern use of galvanized nails for repairs avoids this problem, as they will not rust. The barn and village are situated immediately on the north boundary of Heathrow Airport, and whilst inside we kept hearing the roaring sound of planes taking off. Each time I thought how the people who built the barn and worked there could not have imagined its situation all these centuries later, under the flight path of strange metal machines, and, most of all, actually still standing, valued and cherished. The Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings has called it one of the symbols of the dominance of the rural economy in the past, and the immense investment in craftsmanship and materials that agriculture deserved. Not only is it still standing there, but I have actually brought it home with me inside the camera, although not quite so magnificent an experience as standing on its dusty floor and looking upwards.